Hey, and welcome back. So on this lesson, we're going to go over user research, and we're going to kick off this topic. So if you finish the optional section of market research, you might be asking, what's the difference, right? What's market research and what's user research, and what makes them different? Well, generally speaking, the way that I like to segment these two apart from one another is user research is all about your product's users. Market research is about the broader market outside of your user base, right? So if we go back to our competitors, market research would include users of Adobe products or Sketch or InVision, competitors to Figma, while user research would be Figma users, right? And that's very general, but I think that's a very easy way to think about it. Market research could also include non-users who are using substitute products and other things. And sometimes the feedback you get in user research could validate what the market is saying, or it could be different from what the broader market is saying if you find out that you serve a niche market. But without getting too complex, that's how I would segment it, right? Users of your product from non-users who use competitor or substitute products. Okay. So what is user research? Well, there's two parts of it that we'll talk about, right? So there's quantitative user research and qualitative user research. So you're not going to use every tool that's available out there. You're not going to use every framework that's available. And frankly, there's new tools and frameworks being developed every day. As product managers, we have to learn to be decisive and make trade-offs and make important decisions. And part of that is what tools and frameworks apply to my situation at this given time. So that's not what we're going over today, but just food for thought as you go through this and say, man, I have to do all of this stuff. No, you don't. Pick and choose the things that are applicable and that are going to add value to what you're doing, and help you come to the right solutions, right? That's what they're for. They're not there to check a box. They're there to help you make well-informed decisions. So that's part of what user research is all about. So let's start off with quantitative user research. So some of these things you might be familiar with, like surveys, right? So you've probably taken surveys, you probably have given surveys, and in surveys you're trying to uncover like general ideas, right? Um, Most of the time, you could have like open text field surveys that could be qualitative in nature, and we'll talk about that. But you generally surveys are looking for like a quantitative analysis, right? Maybe we're trying to figure out what features are more important, or like yes or no type questions. It varies in what you're trying to look for, but typically we're looking for um, quantitative type data, meaning how many people feel this way or think this way or want this thing, versus wanting in-depth answers, right? So something that's easy to analyze in a graph or a chart. Usage analytics, this comes from things, this could be things like Google Analytics, which you can kind of set up on your own. There's things that require development help, like tools like Amplitude and Mixpanel. We use Amplitude where I work, and you know, there's tools like Mixpanel that are really good for not only in-product usage, but also tying things to like customer support and marketing and those kind of things. But there's tools out there. And so just pulling up a YouTube video of these products might help you become familiar with what they are if you ever find yourself in a position where the company you're at uses these. But in general, what you're trying to track are what we call events, right? So an event, if you're not familiar, like in marketing with Google Analytics, they call it the same thing. Events are when a user clicks on something or does something in the user interface. Like the way you use this is you come up with value metrics or success metrics saying, hey, if I make this change, I expect X result. Or if we implement this feature, I hypothesize that we're going to get this much adoption of the feature. And then you can track that, right, through usage analytics. All right, so task completion and usability tests. So usability tests are something that we're going to cover and run in most cases, you'll run usability tests on big new features. And so we're actually going to run some usability tests as we go through this course in the user, not in the user research section, but in a later section when we go through solution validation. Okay, so that's coming up. Don't skip ahead. We have more to cover. But basically, and we're going to go over this in more detail, but it's basically identifying what tasks does the user have to be able to complete to get value out of this new feature, and can they complete it? And you can add success metrics around a hypothesis you have of how fast they should be able to do it, um, what level of success rate. So if there's multiple steps, um, like what is considered a success in terms of if there's 5 steps, can they get 4 out of 5 easily? And then can we just tweak one of the steps they didn't get? Or do we have to scrap the whole user flow, right? So that's kind of what you're trying to figure out there. The next one is monthly recurring revenue. This is something that you're generally going to track at a company level if you're a SaaS business. It could be revenue in general, like annual revenue. Depending on what kind of business you're in, you're tracking revenue in whatever form that that your revenue model is set up in. But for all intents and purposes, this is kind of geared towards more SaaS businesses. So monthly recurring revenue, MRR, you're going to want to track that, and preferably by industry that you serve and by size of company. So you could do some correlation analysis of seeing, do we do better in certain industries or certain sizes or certain industries of a certain size, right? The next one is retention by industry, so very similar, and then churn by industry. So how much money do we make, and where do we do well? Where do we retain users well, and who's churning? And maybe through that correlation analysis of the three different ones, we can come up with some good questions to ask of like, why is this happening, and kind of drill into some user research, right? So that's why we do quantitative analysis, is to ask questions so we can dive deeper into qualitative analysis, which is a great transition, to figure out why. So quantitative tells you what's happening. Qualitative tells you why it's happening. So if you don't take any other notes, write that down. Quantitative tells you what's happening. Qualitative tells you why. And you also want to understand the context of your user. So we're going to talk about jobs to be done all throughout this course. And jobs to be done theory, or the jobs framework, is all about contextual problem solving for your customers. So going into qualitative research, there's multiple things you can do. User interviews, which we are going to conduct in this course. It is paramount. I think it's like the #1 tool you could use, whether you're in B2C, B2B, or otherwise. Talking to users, whether it's in person, over Zoom, phone call, Facebook chat, whatever it may be, you want to talk to your users and get feedback. In usability tests, there's a concept called think out loud, right? Where you get the user to whatever comes to their mind, right? No filter, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You want them thinking as they go through, and that's good qualitative insights. So it goes beyond like traditional usability tests are about, can they complete this task? But think out loud voices frustrations or concern or hesitations with, that they're thinking through, or things that don't make sense right off the bat. Maybe it's not as intuitive. So you get some of that qualitative insight if you have your usability testers think out loud. So then open-ended surveys, I mentioned this. This may be one question or a few questions. Don't send 10 to 20. Nobody's going to want to answer that many open-ended questions. But if you have a few targeted questions, or in different, maybe in product surveys, whatever, and you're trying to get targeted feedback at specific event triggered scenarios, right? So like, let's say they finish a certain section of your product and you want feedback on that experience, you could prompt them with a survey and collect that data, right? There's a lot of different uses for it, but another one's in forums and communities. So I think this is one that's very underutilized, where a lot of companies create, Facebook pages, Slack channels, whatever, and they're trying to foster a community because there's this idea of social proofing, right? People want to do what other people do. So in those forums or those communities, you get a lot of good insight because people start talking, and you know once customers start talking amongst themselves, they'll voice frustrations, they'll voice what they love. If you launch a new feature and then no one's talking about it for the next week, maybe it's a bust. Maybe, you know, you didn't put it in an accessible position in the product. Maybe, maybe you didn't really add value. Maybe you just missed the mark. But combining like usage analytics of who's using it and the qualitative of who's talking about it or what they're saying about it is a great mix to understand how you can improve it, or if you just scrap the feature altogether. Okay. And there's things like session, if I can speak today, session sharing tools, a bit of a tongue twister. And one of them that I had pulled up here is live session. So this is one we're actually looking at using at our company. It looks really cool. So basically, it allows you to see what customers are doing in your product, kind of as if you were standing over their shoulder. Sounds a little creepy, but I guess as long as you have your disclosures in place. Hey, look, GDR compliant, CCPA compliant, so I guess we're good. Um, if you don't know what that is, you should be familiar with this as a product manager. It's going over privacy and making sure that we're keeping sensitive data secure, personal data. That's what that's all about. Yeah, so again, qualitative analytics, perfect, right? And then this kind of tells you what goes on. So like even for the basic package, you can view 5,000 like login sessions, which is pretty cool. You can segment different events. You can, filter your recordings based on different tags that you put. It's a lot of cool things. I don't get a commission for this. I just think live sessions a cool product for qualitative research. So, and the last one is shopping cart test. So I think this one's really cool. I heard about this one on a podcast. I didn't make this up. In PM communities, like we share freely with one another, which is great. I love product communities for that reason. And one that I picked up that I really loved was, and it seems simple, but it's really powerful, is let's say you have in a B2B setting, right? Let's say you have really big customers that are throwing feature requests your way, or you sell in an indirect partner channel or a reseller channel, and your partners are asking you for stuff because their clients are asking for stuff, or even in a B2C setting and you're just trying to figure out like what's more important to key customer types or key personas. Well, just like when you go to the store, like as a kid, right? Your parents can't buy you every toy, or you can't get every grocery item because, money is finite, it's limited. It's the same thing in a product organization. You don't have unlimited developers, and you don't have unlimited designers, so you're limited by resources and time on what you can do. So a shopping cart test is pretty cool, especially when you combine it with something like the RICE framework, which we'll go over in a later session. But at a high level, RICE stands for reach, impact, confidence, and uh, effort. There we go. I went blank for a second. So reach is basically how far is what we're gonna do gonna go, right? If we have 1 million users, is this change or this addition or whatever you're doing in your product, is this going to reach 100% of our users? Is this going to reach 50% of our users? And then what's the impact? Is this really valuable? Is this incremental? Is this, going to the Kano model, is it a table stakes thing that we should have done early on, or is this a delighter that's going to really, really add value to our customers? So that's impact. Confidence is like based on the research you've done, how confident are you that this is the right thing? How confident are you of the reach and the impact, right? And then effort is all about development. So this is something you need to get right from your developers, and you can use a simple framework and score it. Like t-shirt sizing is one that people frequently use. Is this a small level of effort, a medium level, or a large level of effort? And you can score each of those, the RICE, RICE, 1 to 5 scale, Likert scale, whatever you want to use, and then figure out how you prioritize things. So once you've prioritized your top, let's say 4 or 5 things that you could go out and build, That's where a shopping cart test comes in. And so a shopping cart test is basically saying, okay, now I'm going to assign a value to each of the features, right? So if we have one that's kind of low impact, low reach, and medium development effort, that's it's a pretty expensive item. So let's say we only have like $50 to go shopping. We'll say that's a $30 item, right? But if we have something that's like it's going to reach everybody, it has a really big impact, we're really confident about it, and it's pretty low hanging fruit, like it's a pretty small dev effort, that's like $10, $5, whatever you want to associate it to, and you just kind of manipulate the numbers. You can use whatever budget you want, but the point is that you have to set it up to where you can't get everything done, right? Your budget has to have a limit to it. Um, and that limit is constrained by the actual time and resources that you have. And so what you're forcing the user to do is actually make some priority about what truly matters to them, as if they were legitimately shopping for something, right? And it helps quantify things in their mind, and subconsciously, like, they understand that there's a cost to developing this thing, um, and that you can't get everything. Like, people resonate with that because everyone goes shopping, right? Like, we can't buy anything and everything that we want, and in the same way we can't develop anything and everything that our customers want. So shopping cart test is really good. The rice framework's really good. If you want a deep dive into those things, go to Medium, Google it. There's plenty of articles on the rice framework, and there's plenty of articles on like shopping cart tests and that kind of stuff. My goal here is not to make you proficient in frameworks. It's to tell you what's out there and the process to use to get from point A to point B in your first product role. So hopefully the high level was valuable, but if you want to dive deeper on those topics, they are definitely plentiful on the internet. All right, so with that, to do user research, you have to find users. And this gets a little tricky because in this project, you don't actually work for the company, right? Unless you do, and if you're in sales or a different department and you're trying to get into the product team at your company, this may be a little easier for you. But if this project is focused on a company that you don't currently work for, it gets a little tricky. So in the next video, I'm going to share how you can find users of the product that you are product managing in this project. So I know that was a mouthful, but we're going to cover this in the next video. So I'll see you there.